Good afternoon. I will be using the sign language interpreter today. Welcome friends from here at WPSD, our friends at the Scranton School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children, and also our friends at the Educational Resources for Children with Hearing Loss, or ERCL. My name is Donald Mesreku. I am the Director of Academic Support here at WPSD. This week we were delighted to have Dr. Tim Hartshorne from Central Michigan University and also Catherine Morgan from C. Morgan Services. They both were here observing classes and providing consultation to teachers related to deaf-blind programming. Thank you both. Dr. Hartshorne is a leader in the studies of deaf-blind education with a focus on charge syndrome and behavior. We would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Hartshorne as he leads us through a discussion on person-centered planning and circle of friends. For our presentation today, what we'll do is Dr. Hartshorne could be available following today's workshop to address individual questions, which Allison will be our interpreter. Also, at the end, Dr. Hartshorne has provided his contact information that you may email him directly, and he'll also can consult with you via email. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everyone online watching. And welcome, Dr. Hartshorne.
Good afternoon. I'm supposed to speak really loudly into this thing so that the Google Translate works, but this is kind of exciting. I've never done this before, and I don't think it's been used here much either. I'm really happy to be back here. I think this is my fourth time to be here and to present to you on different topics. In trying to consider what might be a really useful topic for you, we chose person-centered planning and circle of friends. These are programs that you may be already familiar with to a certain extent, but I think they're critical things for children, not just who are deaf-blind, but children with disabilities in general. And wanted to talk about ways that you might think about using these programs here. So, start out with person-centered planning, and I've highlighted in this definition some of the things that I think are really important to think about what person-centered planning is. A solution-seeking planning process. We're trying to figure out how to solve the issues in a child's life in a planning method. Brings people together, and I think it's one of these really benefits of person-centered planning is in terms of bringing together a community of people who are interested in this child, who are willing to commit to some kind of action planning for them. Create a vision. You know, sometimes when I'm consulting here or other places and I ask the question, what is the vision for this person's future? It's not entirely known yet. And there are lots of reasons for that. Certainly families have to step forward. But just imagine if we knew what the vision was, how we could structure the program more specifically to helping the child achieve the prerequisite skills and abilities that they would need to enable that vision to take place. Develop concrete steps. This is not just pie-in-the-sky stuff. This is really looking at an action plan that will determine how we're going to move from where we are right now to where we want to be in the future. And building connections. You know, life is about the connections that you have, and everybody moving into adulthood needs to live in a community of connections. And so how can the person-centered planning process help that happen for the person? Definition at the bottom, person-centered planning works on the premise that people can and should state the direction in their own lives. Now that can be kind of difficult. How do we know with some of the children that we work with what they want in the future for themselves? This is a struggle that we have with my son, who's now 30, but he's non-vocal. and he has limited sign. So how do we know what he wants in the future? So we as parents have to think very hard about what does Jacob really seem to be interested in and what kind of life would he like, so that we can help create the vision of that and help move him towards it. I want to just briefly compare person-centered planning as an assessment tool to traditional planning. So traditionally, we do formal assessments. We give IQ tests, we give achievement tests, we give a variety of different kinds of tests to find out what the child's abilities and problems might be. We identify deficiencies and needs that the person has, and we bring in all sorts of professional teams with different kinds of roles, and different kinds of reports are written. Very often the reports are put in a file, accessed every 3 years, but maybe not more than that, because now the reports aren't all that interesting or don't necessarily provide all the information that we really need for figuring out where to move with this child's life. So in person-centered planning, to the contrary, discovering and learning who this person is. Now, I have to say I've been really impressed the past 2 days and my other visits here with how well the teachers and staff really seem to get the kids and can really tell us a lot about who this particular child is. But that's really what person-centered planning will also do, and hopefully even elaborate upon that, as you're going to get the perspective not just from the school, but perspective of families and friends. Finding capacities. And, sorry, this thing is just a little bit far from me, so I'm going to look back and forth. It's very awkward. I could look that way, but well, that's not bad. Finding capacities and gifts in the other person. So what do they bring to the table? What kind of gifts do they have? And I'll illustrate this as we move through it. And finally, using family and friends and other connections to come together and be motivated to doing something to facilitate this child's growth in terms of the directions that they want. So goals of person-centered planning. Being present and participating in community life. I mean, they're not always going to be here in school. They're going to be in communities. And what kind of participation do they want to have in their community? With the planning processes that we've done for Jacob over the years, Jacob is very, very well known in his community. We're a city of about 50,000 in the area, but we can't go very many places in town without someone coming up and saying, "Hi, Jacob, how are you doing?" He's well known. He's a member of the community, and that's something that was very, very important to us because we think every person deserves to be a member of their community. Gaining and maintaining satisfactory relationships. It's no fun not to have relationships. It's no fun not to have friends. So how can we facilitate the development of skills and abilities and talents so the child ends up with relationships in their life? Again, people who are interested in Jacob will come up and say hi to Jacob. And that's really, I don't even know who these people are half the time, but they've had some kind of encounter with him over their lives. He is known. Expressing preferences and making choices. And I'm preaching to the choir about the importance of choices here because we spend so much time trying to get the kids to make choices so they can learn how to choose in their lives, make decisions for their lives. But that's really what we want to do, isn't it? We want the kids to grow up and make choices. And it's one of those tricky things for my son Jacob because, again, it's fairly low functioning. But if he indicates, I want to go to Target right now, well, shouldn't that be a choice he can make in his life, assuming it's not midnight or something like that? So, yeah, we have learned to have Jacob's staff take him to do the things that he wants to do because he's a young man choosing the way he wants to live his life. And then continuing to develop personal competencies. Our competencies don't end grade 12, right? The kids leaving this school are going to continue to develop competencies the rest of their lives, certainly impacted by the extent to which people around them are helping to facilitate their developing future competencies. And then fulfilling respected roles and living with dignity. I mean, that's what we all want for ourselves. We should have that for everybody. So if you're going to have a person-centered plan, who should be invited to this plan or this planning meeting? So one of the things you do is you get together with a focus person and help that person to identify who are the important people in their lives. And that can be difficult sometimes because sometimes the person, like my son's non-vocal, how do we know who are the important people in their lives? Well, that means that we as parents certainly have to be paying attention to who they care about, who they would want to have present with them. You can build a relationship map in which you outline all the different people, and I'll show you an example of this later on, all the people who are involved, who are cared about, who care about Jacob, and you pull all these people together on the map and then decide who among these should be invited. You ask the person who they'd like to have there, if they're able to tell you, and they also can tell you, I don't want this person here, I really don't like him that much. And that should be okay too, because it shouldn't just be about what we think is the appropriate thing. It has to be the focused person's decision about what's the appropriate thing. Here was the invitation we sent out for, not the most recent, but actually the person-centered planning we did for Jacob when he was 18. In Michigan, you can go to school until you're 26 if you have significant disabilities. So he had more years to go through, but we wanted to make sure those years were meaningful and really addressing the kinds of skills and abilities that we wanted him to have when he was out of school. So it seemed like this was a really important time. His peers were graduating. He actually went through commencement himself and then went back to school the next day. But it was important marking time in his life that we thought doing a person-centered plan made sense. And I'll talk later about what are the right times to do one of these plans. I like the titles. You're invited to Jacob Hartshorne's future, because we are talking about the future. What is it that we're building? Please come and help unlock the doors into my exciting future by participating. The date, the time, try to choose kind of a neutral location. So we used our church rather than having it in the school or having it in our home, which are not neutral locations. And what is a person-centered plan? A team approach to help plan my future. Why are you invited? Because in some ways you are important to me. What to bring: an open, creative mind and loving heart. Also your appetite, because we're going to eat. So setting the stage, and these things are done very, very informally. My wife organizes these a lot, and you should have like squishy balls or little candies and stuff to have people be relaxed. Sometimes you'll bring in cushions so people can relax in their chairs. It's not supposed to be an intense meeting. It's supposed to be an atmosphere in which we can creatively work together to talk about what we want for the future of this kid. There are a number of different versions of person-centered planning. Community mental health, actually, in Michigan does one every year. It's a complete waste of time. They just trying to fill in some paperwork, and now we have a person-centered plan. It's total opposite of what a person-centered plan is. The version that I'm most familiar with and we've always used is called MAPS. M used to stand for McGill, because McGill University is where this started, the MAPS version, but now it's just called Making Action Plans. I don't know why we took McGill out of it, but we have. So it's just Making Action Plans. And you can see kind of the outline here very briefly that, what's the child's history? What are the dreams? What are the nightmares? How would you describe this kid? What do their needs seem to be? And then making a plan of action. I'm going to go through each one of these. So history. Not everybody who attends a person-centered planning meeting knows the history of this person. What was their birth like? What kind of family were they born into? They live other places for a while. When were siblings added or subtracted? All these things that you can make kind of a history line that actually let the people who were there really understand who this individual is from that historical perspective. So what people and events have shaped this person's life? What have been the highlights? How have others present been part of this history? So you would go around the room and everybody would say, this is how I know this person. I played with them as a kid, or I'm their cousin, or, I go to church with this person. So whatever it is, so you can get a sense not just of the individual's history, but the history everybody in the room has of this particular person. Okay, dreams. When Jacob was going into kindergarten, we had his first person-centered plan. And my wife said during that plan that one of her dreams was that one day Jacob would own his own house and live there without us. I rolled my eyes. I thought this was pretty stupid. Why is Jacob going to be able to do that? But, in fact, Jacob has. When he turned 21, he moved into his own home, which is next door to ours. He has 24/7 care, but he's living independently. And the picture there is part of his team when he first moved into the house. So this is early on in his, probably the first or second day he lived there. We hire college students, and what a life. I mean, that's pretty darn cool. I asked if I could lie there too, and they said no. So what are the dreams, the long-term, short-term dreams? I mean, when you're dreaming, you're really dreaming. I remember going to one person planning for a woman with severe cerebral palsy, and one person said, my dream for Mary is that she gets to jump out of an airplane and land in a tub of Jell-O. Pretty unrealistic. She was probably not going to ever do that. On the other hand, it was a dream about adventure, wasn't it? Why does Mary want to sit home all day long when she could be out doing something that might be exciting for her? And that actually ultimately kind of fit into the action plan that we had for Mary. So the dreams don't have to be realistic. No dream is too big or too small. But they give hope and a possible direction. If we don't dream it, it certainly doesn't happen. If my wife had not dreamed that Jacob would someday live in his own house, I'm pretty darn sure it never would have happened. You have to be able to envision these things, as unrealistic as it might seem at the time, if you're ever going to move there. And what really needs to direct the planning in a child's life is the dreams that we have for the kind of life this person can possibly experience. At the same time, we have fears and nightmares. I have known some people doing the MAPS process who leave this part out because it can be kind of emotional. I disagree with that, with leaving it out, because I think as emotional as it might be, it's very revealing. I know that my wife, I think every single time we've done this for Jacob, she will say, my biggest fear is that Jacob will somehow get lost and not know where he is. And he would have no idea of how to get home. And people around him would have no idea who he was. That's a real troubling nightmare. I mean, if we're sitting as parents in the PCP, we both get pretty emotional around that kind of a fear, even though it's the one my wife identifies with the most. But we have all sorts of fears that he'll be ignored, that someone will abuse him, that he'll never be able to find some kind of work to do. I mean, all these kinds of things that are not totally unrealistic. And they're the barriers to realizing the dreams. You know, one of my issues about buying the house is, could we ever find the funding that would be needed to pay for his caregivers? I thought that was pretty unrealistic. It turned out Medicaid pays for it. So, you know, it was there. I just didn't realize it was there in that kind of an amount. Again, they can be uncomfortable, revealing. They can be kind of emotional. But as we're thinking, how can the fears and nightmares be avoided? So we want to promote dreams while eliminating the possibility of fears and nightmares. And that's the process that the person-centered planning is really geared to do. So the next question is, who is this person? And you can talk about strengths and skills, likes and dislikes, personal qualities, favorite activities, friends. Don't always have to be positive. I remember doing this when Jacob was going into middle school, and it seemed like an important time to do it. And some of his circle of friends was there, which we'll get to. And they were saying, Jacob's really smart, Jacob's really fun, Jacob has a great sense of humor. And I'm wondering where they came up with this stuff, because I don't see it. But they saw it, and they wanted to offer it. And that's one of the brilliant things about this, is he realized that his community of friends sees things in him which they really, really appreciate. But you can add other things, like Jacob really knows how to splash water out of a bathtub better than anybody I know. Or Jacob's really good at spinning around in circles on the floor on his butt really, really well. And so you add some of the humorous things, not unrealistic, as well as the things that really characterize this individual. And then what are their needs? Hopes. What are Jacob's hopes? I frankly don't know, because he can't share that. But I can imagine that he hopes he's always going to be safe. You can actually, it's a little bit of an aside, but he has gotten up in the middle of the night and walked out of his bedroom and checked to make sure there was a staff person there and then gone back to bed. So I know that this is important to him. What are his strengths and interests? What kinds of things does he like to do? It's really, everybody likes to do certain stuff, right? Jacob does like to go to Target. He likes to lie on his trampoline. He doesn't bounce, he just wants to lie on it, right? He likes to go out in front of his yard and lie in a blanket. But he has things that definitely he likes, and part of our task is to identify what those are and facilitate his being able to choose them when he wants to choose them. But you have to know what they are. The activities he likes leads to the thought of what opportunities do we have for him to engage in these, and what kind of supports does he need in order to move forward. One of the great things about having interveners is one of the things interveners are very much trained in is how to develop the appropriate supports for a kid to do what it is that they need to or want to do. The focus on the needs is on the positive. We're not going to go into, well, he needs to get smarter or he needs to be healthier. What are the positive needs that he wants? And you use a lot of brainstorming. Picture there's a kid from he lives in New Zealand. I never would have thought that Cameron would be able to go out and do stuff in stores, especially when he was a kid with enormously bad behavior. But he's doing so well, and as part of a mom who's very, very active in identifying what Cameron needs and finding the resources to meet that. All right, then the action plan. And this is, of course, the most important part, essentially, of the MAPS process, in which everybody in the room has an opportunity to indicate what it is that they're willing to do to implement an action plan. What steps are they going to take? With Mary, who I mentioned the idea about jumping out of an airplane into Jell-O, we knew she wanted to get out of the house. So my wife committed, once a month, Mary, I'm going to come and take you out to lunch, and we'll have a date out. And I know they did that for several years, because I'm willing to commit that time to you as one of your friends who wants to see this action plan take place. So move towards the dreams while avoiding the nightmares. What would a perfect day be like for this person? When we moved into kindergarten and did the person-centered planning, we came out with a perfect day, and it involved Jacob goes outside, gets on the regular bus, he goes to his school, he walks inside, and he has friends, and then at recess there's adaptive equipment out in the playground. He goes to lunch and eats with his friends. I don't remember all the details anymore because that was quite a few years ago. The only thing, though, the school was unwilling to do is let him go the regular school bus, which made sense to us. We understand there was a safety issue there, so he went on the short bus. But it wasn't always short either. Sometimes it was long. But everything else, they did the adaptive equipment. They made sure there was a way for him to have lunch in the cafeteria. I mean, all these things were implemented. But they're not going to be implemented if you don't have in your mind what the perfect day would be like for somebody and laid that out for people, because otherwise, I don't know. It's the day that works for me. I'm not always thinking about what's going to work for the child. And then who's willing and able to support. As I said, Nancy was willing to do that. You find people who sometimes they come out of the woodwork and say, I'll do that. You can't take them to church every Sunday? I'll come by and take them to church. I'm willing to do that. And that's part of building community, isn't it? Because what happens in an ideal community is everyone's providing the support each other needs for the things that they want to do. So knowing what, who, and by when people are going to do things, and that's written down in That's the next slide. Never mind. It's written down in a graphic so that people can see that. Make sure there's a clear plan for follow-up. You need to check back and make sure that people are following through. And use available agency supports and natural supports. So what are agencies willing to step in and do? And then what are the friends and relations willing to step in and do? That's a part of a graphic that we didn't do for ours, but these are often led by a person leads them and someone else does the graphic facilitation when they're drawing in the cute pictures and stuff. But it's really nice to look back on and being able to see graphically, visually, how the plan came together. Okay, when to do a person-centered plan, and basically any time. You know, I mean, there doesn't have to be a specific reason other than people saying, I think we'd like to do a person-centered plan again and see where we are. But transition times are really important. So at Perkins School for the Blind, they're just implementing this throughout the entire school. My wife went and did some training on it, and then they put a course together, which she actually put the course together so that everybody at Perkins is being trained in the process. And right now they're starting with 14-year-olds, because that's kind of an important time to think about transition, and those kids who are 21 and are transitioning out of the school. I can see a time when they do it for all the kids who are entering the school, because I think that's also a critical transition time. So this can be done in a school like Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. If it can be done at Perkins, it can be done here. But you do have to, of course, invite the family, which not a problem here, I know. Invite the family, invite the friends. Find a location to do it in which staff here is willing to go and participate, because it works best when it's a joint enterprise. It's not one of these things that you're just going to bring to the school and say, we did this person-centered plan, now use it. It happens that way. I know it happens that way, but that's not the way it's supposed to happen. You should have people from school, from home, from neighborhood, relations, whoever, all together in a location where they can all put their brains together and say, okay, how are we going to enable dreams, avoid nightmares, and have an action plan indicating what we're going to be doing. Because a lot of what we're going to be doing is educating this kid at Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, right? And so educating them with the dreams in mind, with the goals in mind. This is what we're envisioning for this kid when they get through. We didn't have a lot of that because the school thought we were pretty nuts most of the time. Every year it was like, you're going to do this inclusion program again? We say, well, yeah, that's our plan. Well, we have to do what's best for Jacob, and none of the teachers want him in their classroom next year. It wasn't really an open, facilitative kind of place, but we did it anyway. That's what we wanted in terms of our dream for Jacob. And also Michigan School for the, no, being recorded, never mind. So transition times, starting school, changing schools, leaving school. But any time that it just seems like this would be a really good opportunity to do something for this kid, right? I think we can really do away with a lot of the assessments that we do on children. How often do your kids really need an IQ score? There may be a time when we're so puzzled about how they're doing neurologically that an IQ would be worth spending the time on. But most of the time, in my experience as a school psychologist, I can go to a teacher and say, so how's this kid doing cognitively? And they tell me. Why do I need to go and verify that all the time? Now, with certain teachers you might want to, but we're not going there. But really, we spend so much time testing. I don't know how much testing you do here. I'll have to talk to Heather about that. But so much of it is just to fill in forms to say that we did it. So we got a nice checklist, and but not to plan what we really need to do for this kid. What are the survival words that they need to learn, particularly in terms of where they're going to be going? So if you already have kind of a vision of, I know it might not be there yet, but the vision of what it is that you want them to have when some families, right, they want their kid in their house for the rest of their lives, as the parents' lives. We didn't. I was really ready for Jacob to move out. I really, really was. I feel like a horrible person for saying that, but someone said, how long would it take you to adjust to Jacob not being in your house? And I said, about 10 seconds. It was longer than that. And also, his house is right next door to our house, so it's really convenient. There was an old lady who lived there, and she finally died, and so we bought the house, and we also had an exorcism take place on the front porch, just to be sure. She wasn't the nicest lady in the world. I mean, I got along with her okay, but but so, that's very convenient. I can walk next door and see him. He can come over to our house whenever he wants. And so there's some fluidity. He comes over less and less, I think, as he's really happy in his own place, as far as I can tell. All right, so I think this process gives us much more direction and certainly brings the family and community along with it, so we're all on the same page. And that's really advantageous for everybody. The picture here was at a charge conference quite a few years ago, because the kid who doesn't look like me, because he's Hispanic, is my son Seth, who we adopted from Guatemala. And Seth's now 24, so he's not 24 in that picture. But he came up to me with his friend here, and he said, Dad, take a picture, best buds. And, of course, that's what we want, isn't it, for our kids with disabilities? That they're best buds with people? And not just best buds with someone else who's deaf or someone else who's deaf-blind, which is fine, but best buds with other people, because our community has to be broader than just the deaf community. And I'm sorry if that's stepping on toes, but we live in a larger community, and I want everybody to have access to that community by having best buds. And this quote from Gresham, the degree to which students are able to establish and maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships, gain peer acceptance, establish and maintain friendships, and terminate negative or pernicious interpersonal relationships defines social competence and predicts adequate long-term psychological and social adjustment. In other words, long-term adjustment in life is based to a huge extent on having social relationships. How many social isolates do you know who are just so happy with their life, right? And I think we need these relationships. I really believe this so strongly. And so how can we establish this so that everybody has it? Because we know that some kids are not going to get it. Even though we talk about developing social skills. And that's Jacob with two of his support staff. Actually, the girl on your right, April, she started working with him about 8 years ago. And just to pick up a job, she wanted more money and something to do. Of course, fell in love, and she's now a special ed teacher. So she works with him during the summer and then occasional weekends when she can fit it in. Actually, tomorrow there's a charge syndrome event down in the Detroit area. April's going along with my wife and Jacob because she's so committed to him. The social skills categories, peer relation skills, front of the list. How do I get along with other people? How do I interact with my peers? Self-management skills, which is really important. How do you learn to keep your hands to yourself, for example? But how do I manage myself in such a way that I'm well-regulated and not doing obnoxious, silly things? Academic skills, which, of course, you're very concerned about here. Cooperation skills. It probably said compliance skills, but I'm offended by people talking about making kids comply. So I always change that word to cooperation skills. I want kids to cooperate with the social setting, right? If you're making a scene over in the corner of the room or in the middle of the room, you're not cooperating with us. So that's just my way of thinking about getting kids to cooperate, getting kids to be a part of the setting, part of the community with their social skills. And then assertion skills. Every now and then you have to stand up for yourself. And I heard that actually a lot, particularly yesterday, I think, with some of the kids. People saying, yeah, they know how to advocate for themselves. And that's a wonderful, wonderful skill. Not always easily developed. So we want to develop these social skills in kids, but how do they learn social skills? hang out with their parents? Yeah, I mean, only children learn a lot of good social skills, but it's adult social skills. They're never really too comfortable with their peers. Maybe some of you are only children saying, wait a minute, I resent that remark. But no, you probably represent the remark. It's really difficult when you've hung out with adults all your life to know how, because everybody else seems so immature. But you don't learn it in a vacuum is my point. We learn social skills by trying out stuff with the group. So you try out stuff and you get feedback and say, oops, I don't think I'm actually going to do that one again. And I try something else out. Wow, that made me kind of popular for a moment. And that's how we develop the skills. If you're deaf, it's already restricted. If you're deaf-blind, it's even more restricted. I mean, any kind of disability restricts it to a certain extent, because where are the kids running around saying, oh yeah, hang out with us? You know, it reminds me as I think about Chantel, who's from Canada, almost completely, probably completely deaf, I'm not sure, but certainly deaf and visually impaired, saying, I can't go to the mall with my friends because I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't really know where we're going or why we're going there, and it's just no fun. So how do I develop appropriate social skills if I'm not in that kind of environment? As I say, Jacob's got the life. Social skills deficits, and there are 3 levels of deficits. There's acquisition deficit. I never acquired this skill. And I know that some of you work really, really hard to help the kids acquire some skills. And they probably do to a certain extent, but that gets into performance deficits. Just because I know the skill doesn't mean I know to use the skill or even think about using the skill. So you have to sort out whether the lack of social skills is because they're not performing it, or they never acquired it. And then there's fluency skills, fluency deficits. And that's the kid that comes up in your face and says, what color is your car? What color is your house? What color is the road between here? I know they get hung up on colors or whatever it is. They're trying, they've been told what they're supposed to do, but the fluency isn't there very well. But again, those things are dealt with in a social setting. We have to have a group of friends in order to be able to acquire these things, and that's the importance of a circle of friends. Another thing that makes it really important are negative relational schemas. So peer rejection isn't just the result of deficient social skills. It's also developed and maintained by the way people think about you and evaluate you. So some kids are rejected because no one likes them. They have a bad reputation. True story, in college there was a kid that today we would say has Asperger's. We wouldn't actually, because that's gone away. We don't have Asperger's anymore. So high-functioning autism. Jonathan was a very odd guy. And I remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, I think I should try to hang out with Jonathan, because I can see he doesn't have any friends. And she said, oh, you better not do that, because if you do that, people will associate you with him and you won't have any friends. Great girlfriend. But I followed her advice. I never was friends with Jonathan Jenkins, which is kind of sad, isn't it? I mean, it's like, why in the world not? But when we have these negative relational schemas, then you're breaking that to go over and sit in that section of the cafeteria, labels you in a negative way. So we have to overcome that by creating social support networks or circles of friends so that people will have them. So that's actually a picture of Jacob's circle of friends and some year or other, elementary school, obviously. So the definition, developing a natural social support network for an individual. It's meant to be a support to the person's inclusion into the school, community, and workplace. Now, it can happen in this school. You have socially isolated, rejected kids in the school. I know you do. I mean, it's inevitable. It's not because it's who you are. It's just because every school does. And there are kids here who are really terrific, right? And have good social skills and are well-adjusted. So there's potential to find some kids who are willing to be part of a circle of friends for a kid who doesn't have that available to them. So inclusion within this school, inclusion within neighborhoods, etc. really important. What we did when Jacob was in kindergarten, we asked his one-on-one, who are the kids in his classroom who seemed to like him? Jacob had a big refrigerator box in the classroom with stuff hanging down from the top so he could go inside to de-stress from all the sensory overload. The only problem was when he went into the box, 2 or 3 kids went in with him, so he was never quite left alone. But the aide and the teacher could say, yeah, here are the 5 kids who seem really, really interested in Jacob. So we invited those kids and their families to a picnic. Now, who's not going to come to a picnic, right? So they all came, and we fed them. And then we said, we're going to form a circle of friends for Jacob. And we wondered if you might be okay with your child being a part of his circle. Now, we had just fed them, given them a picnic. Yeah, so all of them said, absolutely, we'd love to have that happen. So that was the beginning of his circle of friends. This girl, she was in a circle from the very beginning, at the end of kindergarten through high school, and still occasionally drops by to say hi, right? So, I mean, it doesn't mean it's not completely non-fluid. So what did the circle do? Well, we had monthly meetings at the school in which, we'd practice some sign language, or we do some simulation of what it might be like to have charge syndrome, or we plan parties. I remember the favorite parties for a long time was going to the campus swimming pool because Jacob loves the water, as many kids with disabilities do, and people without disabilities. One year, though they were planning it, and someone said, let's go to a movie. Oh yeah, let's go to a movie. And then one girl raised her hand and said, that would be fun for us, but would that be fun for Jacob? Yay, it worked. They get it. They understand what being a friend to Jacob means. I mean, in kindergarten, first grade, he got invited to birthday parties from lots of people, but that stopped, right? So the circle of friends, though, still provided an avenue for friendships within the school. And the meetings were held at the school. We always invited the teachers to attend. We never had a teacher attend, which I thought was really kind of sad. In fact, we go to team meetings, and they'd say, well, Jacob has a social problem over here. And we said, well, have you talked to the circle of friends? Oh, should we do that? That's why we have a circle of friends, a bunch of people who know Jacob, care. I watched them, this was in 7th grade, and they were sitting in a circle. It became so popular, it got too big. And there's one girl running for 6th grade class president. And the first thing she had on her list of accomplishments was member of Jacob's circle of friends. And it was kind of a status thing for the kids. But they were sitting in this large circle, and Jacob started doing some kind of weird stuff, which he does. And one kid sitting next to him just went over and put her hand on his leg. He settled down, didn't say a word, just did it, right? They kind of got Jacob. He had a support group. It got harder in high school. I have to say, I had 2 college students who were trying to facilitate it, but the kids were so busy with activities, from marching band to football to whatever it was, that it was really hard to sustain itself. We would still talk to them, and they were still interested in supporting Jacob, but I know they did that during the school hours, but it just lost some of its formality. But as I say, there was one girl that was in the circle of friends in 7th grade, became one of his caregivers, was a caregiver probably for 5 years. So, there's still involvement. Called circle of friends, think about our circles. And how full are your circles? So, here's Fred. Okay, and when you do the circles, you put Fred in the middle, and then the next circle around Fred is the circle of intimacy. These are the people most intimate in your life. You can't imagine living without them. So Fred's got mom and dad, brother and sister. The next one is the circle of friendship, very close friends, whom you choose to spend your time with. Fred doesn't have any. Then the circle of participation, people, teams, organizations that you're interacting with, frequently colleagues at work, members of your church, etc. Fred doesn't have any. Then you get to the circle of exchange. These are people you pay to be in your life. Yeah, Fred's got those. You got the various physicians and specialists who are paid to be a part of his life. And those are the people he socializes with when he goes to the doctor's office. That's when he goes and sees people. This is not what we want for any child, any adult for that matter, that is kind of the circle of your life. Because for many reasons, but one is that mom and dad aren't going to be around forever. And brother and sister are probably going to move away. So then who do you have? Well, I better go and live with my brother, which may not be good for anybody, right? So we need to find a way to fill up these circles, and creating a circle of friends is one way to begin to do that, because then the person is within the community. We asked Jacob's circle, this was when they were probably in 3rd grade or something like that, what would it be like if, Jacob's life was just like Fred? And these are direct quotes. I'd be so lonely. I'd be so sad. No one wants to go to school with just teachers. What's the point? And I'd kill myself. I kind of get that. It's like, absolutely. Who wants to live life like that? And yet I think there's so many adults out there, especially those with disabilities, that's it. There's no reason why you can't create a new circle of friends in adulthood. Now, Jacob's got like 14, 15 caregivers at any one time, and they're all college students except for April, who's a special ed teacher. And he goes to their apartments, he meets their roommates, they walk around campus, they go out into different stores, they see people. We have ended up hiring people to work with them because they met him through one of their friends that was always with Jacob. So he has a circle of friends because they're not, I hate the term caregivers, because they are kind of his companions. In fact, when you ask them who they are in any kind of formal setting, they'll say, I'm Jacob's friend. And that's actually what we're kind of working towards. There was one girl who said, I never want to leave Jacob. She was graduating. And I said, Sabrina, I'm okay if you marry him. But she didn't. She married another guy. Yeah, come on. I almost had it worked out for Jacob. But he does have, and not just women, by the way, that we do have some guys, and it's always good. The guys have a different kind of relationship with him. One was always making him go out and do like strengthening exercises and stuff, or go walking and things. He was a mixed martial arts fighter, one of the top amateurs in Michigan. Here he's just taking my kid out there. Didn't make him do mixed martial arts fighting, so that was good. But he did have him working out. So we did a relationships map. I promised you I'd show you one later with Jacob at one point in time. And you can see, unlike Fred, he's got a lot of people in his circles. We've never kept him isolated at home. He has jobs. He goes to a diner and cleans menus. He returns bottles and cans, which are 10 cents each in Michigan from the deposit. That's at the store. He makes dog biscuits and sells them at a local pharmacy. But he is out there doing things, so he has colleagues in a sense. I mean, the diner, actually, that was a connection through soccer, not Jacob's soccer, but my other kids' soccer, and they said, because Jacob would show up at the soccer games, could we have him come work for us? Of course you can, right? I mean, he only does it 3 mornings a week for about a half an hour, and he gets paid with a milkshake, but he has something that he does. He has contact with people in the community. So we have Jacob, we have family, we have extended family and close friends, we have his circle of friends and other people who are really important to him in his life. And then, there are other people who are in the circle of exchange that are there for Jacob, but they're not the majority of the people. The majority of the people are right there, front and center. So we think about how to implement this kind of stuff. If I said Perkins is doing the person-centered planning, I don't know that they're into a circle of friends at this point in time, but I think I would want them. The new school psychologist for the deafblind program at Perkins is one of my students in the doctoral program at CMU, so it gives me a nice direct connection with what's going on there. That's how I knew that they were doing a 14 and graduating, because I emailed her and said, I'm talking at Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. How is that implementation coming along? But she says it's doing really well. So Jacob was an inclusive classroom in his neighborhood school. That's obviously not the model here. And I'm not at all suggesting one model is always better than the other model. I can see some things going on here Jacob would have really benefited from. On the other hand, I think he really benefited from the inclusion and having some friends and being part of his community. So it could be a bit of a toss-up. But there's a wide range of ability here. And make use of it, right? Is there opportunities for some of the older college-bound students to maybe spend some time supporting in a circle some of the other kids, or getting to know the other kids so that they can be part of a MAPS process at some point and kind of suggest what might be really helpful, because kids get this stuff better than adults tend to do. And then also assisting the parents whose kids come here. These kids still are at home for part of the time, right? They're home on weekends, and they're home in the summer, and they're living in neighborhoods, and we don't want them to go home and be isolated there, because then we're not really working, because you're teaching the kids so they can live in community. So we need to be building that community into them all the time that they're here. So they should have friends, and they should have neighbors, and they should be known, they should be out and about. So helping parents to figure out how to do that, and the person-centered planning is one way to bring school and family together. And then also just helping the parents see the benefit of a circle of friends. When you think about the IEP, the person-centered plan, the action plan can fold right into the IEP, because all the goals and objectives for the IEP ought to match with the goals that we're working for in the action plan. What is the perfect day? And if we're moving to building in a perfect day for a kid, that can feed into the IEP as well. Building social supports. Now, I don't know how much your IEPs focus on the social aspects of the child's life, but those ought to be objectives that we're thinking about. How is this kid integrating within the school community, integrating in with their home community, and developing those social skills, and have an opportunity to learn social skills within a group. So then utilizing the circle of friends. They say the school was not good about utilizing Jacob's Circle, partly because they never came to the meetings. They really didn't know what it was all about. They never quite got it, which was a real loss on both sides, I think. But that can be utilized, and the utilization of it can be built into. These are the things that, in the IEP, that the circle is going to be engaged in. Positive behavioral supports, gets into the developing of positive social skills, which is a big part of, dealing with the behaviors the kids are exhibiting. And then what skills are required to live a fulfilling, respected life, and have a life of dignity. So keeping those skills always in mind as we put together an IEP. This is my email. I'm actually on contract here for follow-up, so it doesn't hurt me if you email me and say, hey, could you talk to me about the stuff you talked about here, or other stuff I've talked about here, from behavioral issues and charge issues and basic deaf-blind issues. I'm happy to consult. I learn more from responding to emails than I learn from most anything else. I'll get an email about a person describing a behavioral issue, and I'll go, oh my gosh, I've got no idea, and I stew about it for a few days. Suddenly I have a brainstorm, and I'm learning something. I'm figuring stuff out, and we go back and forth a few times. So I'm just saying, don't at all hesitate ever to contact me about any issue that I might be able to assist with. So I hope this is useful. I hope you guys think about using this stuff. And again, thanks for having me here. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Hartshorne. Everyone have a great weekend. On your way out, please make sure that you sign the paper that you were here today. Also, Dr. Hartshorne is here if you have any questions you would like to speak to him directly. Allison will be here to interpret or follow up with an email. Thank you.